Jenson Button spent 3 years driving the same car as Lewis Hamilton. Same engine, same tyres.
Hamilton waiting, and this looks good.
And when he looked at Hamilton's data after a session, he saw something that confused him. Hamilton wasn't smooth. He was hammering the brakes as hard as possible, applying the exact same throttle pressure every lap, and doing everything through the steering wheel.
Very tidy, clean move from Lewis Hamilton.
Button went on the record about it.
I don't have the God-given talent of a Lewis Hamilton.
And when you understand what he revealed, it changes how you see every race Hamilton has ever won. 7 championships, 105 victories, and a move to Ferrari that was supposed to be the crowning chapter. All of it shaped by what Hamilton's right foot does on corner exit. And right now, that same technique is the reason he cannot keep up with his own teammate. On the High Performance podcast, Button laid it out. Hamilton comes into a corner, hammers the brake. There is no modulation.
For example, Lewis comes into a corner, hammers the brake, as hard as he can. There's no modulation. Goes on the throttle, the same amount of pressure every time. It's linear.
He turns in, goes onto the throttle, the same amount of pressure every time, and does everything through the steering wheel. Button's own approach was the opposite. He modulated the throttle carefully, so he never had to correct his steering angle. The engineers called Button smooth, but it revealed the contradiction at the heart of Hamilton's reputation. The driver the world believed was the smoothest on the grid was actually one of the most aggressive. His car appeared smooth because his steering inputs managed everything in real time. His right foot was doing something far more blunt, and that consistency is where the magic lives. But it starts with the left foot, not the right. Mark Hughes described Hamilton's driving pattern in a technical analysis for the race. Hamilton brakes late and hard, using the extreme pitch of the car to load the front tyres. He turns in slightly early. Then, as he releases the brakes, the rear rotates around the front. The sensitivity required in that millisecond moment, preventing the rotation from building into a slide, is what has made this work across nearly 2 decades. Engineers call the resulting shape a V-line, a sharp geometric angle rather than a flowing arc. Hamilton brakes deeper into the turn, rotates aggressively at the apex, and drives out on a straight exit line. Heikki Kovalainen, Hamilton's teammate at McLaren, confirmed this. He said Hamilton's lines were more square than his own, that he braked late and deep, and his exits were quite straight. Kovalainen believed that was the reason Hamilton preserved tyres so well. He puts less energy into the rubber, and when he does, he puts it in places that hurt the tyres less. When you accelerate on a straight exit line, all available traction goes toward forward motion. No energy wasted fighting a cornering load. The rear rubber stays cooler, the stint lasts longer, and the data backs it up. At the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix, Hamilton's hard compound rear tyres degraded at 0.05 seconds per lap. Verstappen, same compound, same track, same day, degraded at 0.162, nearly 3 times worse.
Hamilton pulls ahead of Verstappen before they get to the corner. The crowd go absolutely wild.
Andrew Chauvelin, Mercedes trackside engineering director, explained it simply. You damage rubber by getting it hot, by sliding it. Hamilton is just better at keeping it cool than the others. The linear throttle is why. Avoiding sudden torque spikes means avoiding the microslides that generate heat. Heat starts a vicious circle where sliding creates more heat, pressures climb, and the compound falls off a cliff. Hamilton's right foot never triggers that cycle. He deliberately accepts slower early stint pace and lets the balance come to him rather than fighting it. And it produced some of the most memorable victories in the sport's history. Turkey, 2020, a freshly resurfaced Istanbul Park in the rain. Hamilton started 6th, pitted once for intermediates on lap 8, and ran them for 50 consecutive laps. By the end, the grooves had worn completely smooth.
Hamilton wins the Turkish Grand Prix and is a 7-time champion of the world.
He had turned wet weather tyres into slicks through 50 laps of surgical throttle control. He won by 31 seconds and clinched his 7th World Championship. Now fast forward to Spain, 2021. Verstappen led from pole. Hamilton sat behind him, managing his soft tyres for 28 laps, longer than anyone in the top group. That patience created the option for a second pit stop. He came in with 23 laps remaining, immediately lapped over a second faster, and caught Verstappen with 7 to go. 2 years later in Mexico City, Hamilton set the fastest lap on mediums that were 42 laps old, rubber that should have been finished 10 laps earlier. The same linear throttle, the same patience. Now, how does this compare to the legends? Ayrton Senna used rapid throttle blipping, staccato stabs through corners that functioned as manual traction control. In the turbo era this worked because each input did not dramatically shift the aero balance. Hamilton never had to do that. He finds the moment through the steering instead. Verstappen represents the philosophical opposite. He prefers an oversteery car, using aggressive throttle to rotate the rear and managing instability through reaction speed. Leclerc described it simply. Verstappen is aggressive. Hamilton is less aggressive, but he thinks more. The linear throttle is not a lack of aggression. It is aggression channeled into a system where the brain does the work before the foot touches the pedal. And that system worked for 15 years. Until the cars changed underneath him. The 2022 regulations introduced ground effect aerodynamics, stiff floors, minimal suspension travel, and cars almost entirely resistant to the pitch and dive behavior. Hamilton's braking had exploited his entire career. The rotation that had won 7 championships stopped working. Hamilton began using throttle mid-corner to rotate the car instead. It worked mechanically, but it cooked the rear rubber. The driver who built his legend on tyre preservation was now overheating his rears because the car would not let him drive his way. George Russell beat Hamilton 19-5 in qualifying during 2024. Chauvelin admitted the whole generation of car did not suit Hamilton's style. Then came Ferrari. And a new set of problems that cut even deeper. Ferrari's braking system uses 3 separate contributions on the rear wheels: hydraulic brakes, energy recovery from the MGUK, and engine braking friction. Leclerc had spent years mastering the art of overlapping brake and throttle pedals simultaneously to manage all 3. Hamilton, after 18 years of Mercedes calibrations, found the system alien. The telemetry from the 2025 Australian Grand Prix showed the gap clearly. Hamilton braked later and harder than Leclerc, but achieved lower minimum speeds. He waited until the rotation was complete before applying power. Leclerc used throttle to help create rotation while the car was still turning. At the Jeddah hairpin, Leclerc was on throttle 20 meters earlier. In a single corner, that was worth 0.053 seconds. Hamilton's 2025 season became his worst statistically. 6th in the championship, 86 points behind Leclerc, without a Grand Prix podium. The technique was trapped inside a car that spoke a different language. There were flashes. Silverstone saw him finish 10 places ahead of Leclerc. The Chinese sprint showed his degradation as the best on the grid. The technique still existed. The car just did not want it. And that brings us to 2026. The new regulations strip back ground effect. Most critically, the chassis should once again pitch and dive under braking. The dynamic weight transfer Hamilton's system depends on should return for the first time since 2021. Hamilton tested the SF26 at Barcelona and said something he had not said about a Formula One car in years: more fun to drive, oversteery and snappy but easier to catch. There is not a single thing I will miss about the previous generation of cars. Early testing at Bahrain showed Ferrari's 2026 car reaching full throttle several meters earlier than Mercedes and McLaren on corner exits. The V-line exit becomes a weapon again. Hamilton also did something he had never done. He committed to 14 months of simulator development for the SF26. A driver who once did maybe 20 laps a year on the simulator immersed himself in the virtual car. When he emerged, he said it had his DNA in it. Whether that is enough remains the open question. Hamilton is 41. Leclerc is 12 years younger, with a car built around his instincts. But Hamilton's technique has never been about reflexes. It has always been about discipline. The same linear pressure when the brain screams to push harder. The steering managing what the foot cannot. Slower early laps so that when everyone else's rubber gives up, his is still alive. That is what Button saw on the telemetry at McLaren 15 years ago. The same flat line, lap after lap after lap. If the 2026 Ferrari gives Hamilton back the pitch under braking that his body has been searching for since 2022, that flat line might have one more championship left in it. And if it does not, then at least we finally understand what it was. It was never smoothness or finesse. It was a throttle commitment, so linear, so disciplined, and so stubbornly unchanging that it bent an entire sport around it for 15 years.